Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Thursday, July 10th, 2025, and today we are going to be talking about the North Carolina Senate race yet again, just days after I made a video talking about Lara Trump considering a bid for U.S. Senate in the 2026 race. Donald Trump, when asked by a reporter as to how he would vote in North Carolina, says that Lara Trump is his first choice, endorsing her in the 2026 Senate election. Now, a bit of a caveat here. Donald Trump has endorsed Lara Trump to run in the 2026 Senate race, but Lara Trump herself has not announced that she is running for Senate. And while the signs are very much clear that she does want to run and that she likely will, Donald Trump's endorsement only makes it that much more likely that an announcement comes soon. Because Donald Trump's endorsement of her has absorbed a lot of the oxygen that we have now seen. Calling her his first choice essentially means that everybody in that state who is backing Donald Trump should back her in the GOP primary. And Donald Trump held out on endorsements in this race for a very long time. Senator Thom Tillis, the Republican incumbent, he was never going to endorse. But over time, he had met with potential primary challengers and floated the idea that Lara Trump should be running for Senate, but also some other candidates in the event that Lara Trump decided not to. And just a day after Thom Tillis was opposed to early provisions of the Big Beautiful Bill, Donald Trump tweeted out on Truth Social that he was speaking with primary challengers to Thom Tillis and that there would be a challenger to him in 2026. The next day, Thom Tillis announces that he's no longer running for re-election. In December of last year, he had said he would run again in 2026. He would withdraw from the race, retire from politics after 2026, and instead leave it to the GOP to make their own selection. And so Donald Trump's endorsement of Lara Trump also isn't the only major endorsement that she has received. With a caveat, the RNC chairman, who's also from North Carolina, and that is the caveat, he has not ruled out his own bid for U.S. Senate, but has said that Lara Trump is the right decision, that he agrees with Donald Trump that Lara Trump should be the next senator from North Carolina. So the stars are very much aligning in favor of Lara Trump in this GOP primary. Again, she already told Fox News Radio, I'm considering running. So she has already been very open about this, that she's considering running the RNC chair, the president of the United States. There's not much more that you need to decide that you want to run for Senate, especially if you're already toying with the idea that you'd run. Now, there's other big news on the Democratic side. Jeff Jackson announced to the press that he's endorsing Roy Cooper in the Senate race, which is also quite interesting, too, because Roy Cooper himself, similar to Lara Trump, has not announced that he is running for Senate. And so you have two candidates on both sides of the aisle receiving some pretty high-profile endorsements from some major names in the GOP, in the Democratic Party, especially around North Carolina politics, and yet neither of these two candidates have announced that they want to run. But I think it is news that Donald Trump making this endorsement for Lara Trump means something. I think it contributes to this consistent idea that Donald Trump often chooses the weakest candidates to run in the Senate races, in the governor races, in the House races, and that's because, arguably speaking, the political instincts of this president are pretty contained only to his own races. Looking back at the 2024 election, clearly Donald Trump's campaign team did something right. But as it goes to Donald Trump having this level of influence on the GOP, you would think that he would be endorsing some stronger candidates. And a big reason for that is because I do believe firmly that Lara Trump is probably one of the worst candidates you could run in the 2026 midterm elections. Voters will turn out for Trump, but they will not necessarily turn out for his daughter-in-law just because she shares the same last name. Donald Trump has influence over the national stage. He has controlled the GOP primaries in every single race since he has become president-elect in 2016. And since then, you've seen that time and time again, Donald Trump has consistently let down his party by choosing people like Herschel Walker and Dr. Oz and Blake Masters to lose races that were otherwise very winnable. Even in 2024, when he himself was on the ballot, a number of down-ballot Republicans could not outperform him. Why? Because voters didn't like the policies they stood for. They liked Trump and everything that he stood for, and then when the Republicans decided to repackage it and make it their own, it didn't work for them. Because voters give Donald Trump the pass on many things they do not for many of these Republicans. Carrie Lake in Arizona is a great example. She says the most unhinged things to the American public, to the Arizona constituents, but often it's just a repackaged talking point from Donald Trump. But voters are used to this Trump effect. It's not news that Donald Trump has said something that voters might find unhinged, and in some cases, it actually makes him more appealing to some of these more middle-of-the-road Americans who believe that although he is In some cases, as they see it unhinged, they see it as authentic. For many of these Republicans, they see it as trying to copy Donald Trump, trying to be something they're not. Carrie Lake is a great example. She lost in 2022. She lost in 2024. And a big reason for it is that she tried to be Donald Trump, and it doesn't work that way. Sam Brown lost because in 2022, he tried to run to the right of Adam Laxalt in the GOP primary and was really, he had a number of things come out against him because of the things he said in a GOP primary 2 years before he decided to run in the 2024 Senate race. That's how much these things follow you. Thinking about candidates like Mike Rogers, more middle of the road, but couldn't shake Donald Trump, couldn't shake the narrative that was being spun onto him. Thinking about Wisconsin, Eric Hovde, who was a big supporter of Donald Trump, tried to do the Donald Trump style of campaign in Wisconsin. Only really in Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Montana did this work out for these Republicans. But Montana voted for Trump by 20, Ohio voted for Trump by 11, so it should have worked out for these Republicans. Pennsylvania is the only real example of Dave McCormick, who did adopt similar talking points to Donald Trump, where you actually successfully won a competitive election. And so now thinking with this Trump endorsement for Lara Trump in North Carolina, I think it is near certain that she decides to run. And with it being near certain, puts it in a position that Democrats can really jump this race into overdrive. Because it is one thing to be endorsed by Donald Trump and still shaking, the unpopularity of the president. In 2018, you could find that a lot of the candidates that did go on to win in the 2018 Senate races did, in fact, endorse Donald Trump in 2016 and were endorsed by him in 2018. People like Rick Scott in Florida. Donald Trump went down there to campaign for him. Granted, it was a close margin and much closer than any other state had been, comparatively, but Donald Trump endorsed them. Indiana, Tennessee, Missouri, North Dakota. Thinking about that, what do you have? Mike Braun. You have Marsha Blackburn. You have Josh Hawley. You have Kevin Kramer. I think that's his name. Let me double check. Yes, Kevin Kramer, because I covered that race in 2018. The point is that these four states, Donald Trump did full-fledged endorsements, but it didn't always work. Right? Some cases, you couldn't shake it. Thinking about Patrick Morrissey, barely ran a campaign, bad candidate for West Virginia, couldn't beat Joe Manchin. Think about that. Martha McSally, endorsed by Donald Trump, couldn't beat Kyrsten Sinema, right? Thinking about this now, Dean Heller, not a fan of Donald Trump. Donald Trump didn't really like him, but still, you couldn't shake Donald Trump's negative popularity. Voters didn't like him, and they responded to it accordingly. Montana, which voted for him by 16, elected a Democrat. West Virginia, that voted for him by 40, elected a Democrat. And so in some cases, I think it is too much, and I do not think that Lara Trump will be the one who, in any case, can shake Donald Trump's name. Because many of them could in 2018, but it is really hard to do when you are the daughter-in-law, and your entire endorsement is the fact that your father is the president of the United States. And while I don't think that Lara Trump would lose the election to the degree that we've seen some Republicans do in elections like 2022 and in 2018, I don't think that's going to be the case, that she's losing by double digits, but I certainly do think she would lose, and she'd probably lose by about 5 points. And for North Carolina Democrats, that would be very strong in terms of performance, better than they have seen in a very long time. Because the last time Democrats really had an opportunity at winning was in 2020, and that fell apart in the final month of the campaign. Cal Cunningham, the Democratic nominee for Senate in North Carolina, maintained a very strong lead in the polls for a very long period of time. Tom Tillis was exceptionally unpopular, and voters really started to like Cal Cunningham. At points in time in July, was polling as high with a 10-point lead. But up even through October, he maintained an advantage that was very impressive, about 7 points across the state a month out from the election. But here's where everything really went poorly for Cal Cunningham. Scandal after scandal emerged that he was having an online text message affair while he was with his wife during the campaign. Text messages leaked of Cal Cunningham doing all of these different things that made voters really question his moral character and his moral judgment, and his lead practically vanquished. In just a month, Cal Cunningham went from leading by 7 points across the state to leading by 3, leading by 2.6%, only to lose the election by 1.8%. That shift here, the very little shift that it seems, well, not really, but a 4-point shift, could have made all the difference. If Cal Cunningham was underperforming the polls by about 4 points, if he was up by 6.5, he probably would have won this Senate race. Democrats have not won a Senate race in North Carolina going back from this election all the way back to 2008 when Kay Hagan defeated Elizabeth Dole. That was the last time that Democrats won North Carolina. And looking at every election since 2010, 2014, 2016, 2020, 2022, Democrats have become routinely unlucky by the circumstances of the year, by the candidates that they have run. And looking at now 2026, there is a perfect opportunity, and Donald Trump is setting the stage for them. Roy Cooper could win this Senate race. But against Lara Trump, chances are so could Don Davis and so could Wiley Nickel. These are three candidates who, if they were faced up against Lara Trump in a midterm election, like 2026 is expected to be, I would bet more on the Democrat than I would on the Republican. And that's just me. And so looking at, what we can expect with likely a pending announcement from Lara Trump and with Donald Trump saying that she is his first choice, the ads are already writing themselves. Democrats are getting in a better position. And so looking at the 2026 races, North Carolina could very well be one of those states that, although will be competitive and will require a lot of energy and a lot of fundraising and a lot of on-the-ground work, Democrats, for the first time in a very long time, would start out as the near favorites in North Carolina. They have been the underdogs in election after election, even in 2020. North Carolina still went to Trump. 6 out of the 7 swing states that Donald Trump and Kamala Harris contested in 2024, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada, 6 out of the 7, Joe Biden won. 7 out of the 7, Donald Trump won in 2024. But North Carolina was the one that stuck out. Donald Trump defeated Joe Biden by 1.3% in this state. And now keep in mind that Senate race, Cal Cunningham had been consistently outperforming Joe Biden in the polls in North Carolina. There were crossover voters that were saying, I'm voting for Trump, but I like Cal Cunningham. He's a military veteran. He's somebody that I believe would represent North Carolina better than Tom Tillis, who was at a record low on popularity. But again, that final month of the campaign really did him in. And so looking at 2026, Democrats obviously, barring a Cal Cunningham type of situation, are starting out in a very similar position to Cunningham. Except this time, Lara Trump will be at the disadvantage. Cal Cunningham and Tom Tillis were neck and neck in early stages of the 2020 race. Even as late as after the primary, they weren't in a position where Cal Cunningham had a clear advantage over Tom Tillis. It was going to be one of the closest races of the country. And so looking at the 2026 race, it'll probably start out with a narrow advantage in favor of the Democratic Party. A race that probably was a bit more advantageous to the GOP with Tom Tillis or another brand new Republican, like when Donald Trump endorsed Ted Budd. That was a good move. Why? Because Ted Budd went on to win and didn't have many scandals. Didn't really have much come up while he was running for Senate in North Carolina. And it was a good enough pick that even the national GOP, felt very comfortable falling in line behind Ted Budd. It was in other cases where they had someone like Dr. Oz, where the national GOP largely disagreed with the decision. Ted Budd was good. He was running against Pat McCrory, who was the unpopular former Republican governor who had ran in 2016 and lost his reelection because of how unpopular he was, despite Donald Trump winning the state. And so Ted Budd was clearly the right choice for Trump. Lara Trump very clearly is the right choice for Trump, but the bad choice for the GOP and a bad choice for the voters in North Carolina because they really are not going to love her. And they didn't really love Ted Budd either. He won in 2022 despite a lack of national investment from the Democratic Party, and even then, only went to him by 3.2% against Sherry Beasley. And so thinking about 2026, I'd make the argument that Roy Cooper comes in and likely wins by 5 points. And so I'd watch North Carolina. With Donald Trump's endorsement, it is only, counting the days until Roy Cooper makes an announcement, until Lara Trump makes an announcement, and this race will be set. The primaries will be over before they even begin. And that matters. This race will go straight into the general election for the next year and a half, and it will be fascinating because North Carolina right now is a state the Democrats have had consistently bad luck, but this time they might have caught a break. Heavy on the might because things can change in American politics, but it looks like Donald Trump just gave them one of the best gifts that he could have, and that is endorsing his daughter-in-law to be the next U.S. Senator in a state that will not be kind to her in the general election come next year. So keep your eye out. It will be very fun to watch. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already. And check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video for you to watch and then a playlist for my 2026 Senate election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.